pocket. Now, let me just find the stick to make this a little bit easier. It's a much better example. Very cool. On to the next one. Now up ahead, right there, is a cedar tree. As we get closer, I'll give you some identifying characteristics. But that's something that you should always be happy to see if you're looking to make a fire. Promise, now that we're closer up, I'll give you a couple of identifying characteristics of the cedar tree. For one, it has a fairly straight trunk. Now, that being said, it's not round. It's kind of like lumpy, has a lot of different nodes almost, or kind of sections that kind of interweave together. So when these trees die, they quite often look kind of really neat and artistic, almost like driftwood. As far as their needles go, careful, they are pointy, but unlike a lot of other pine trees which have just single straight needles, much like this down here, or hemlocks which have short flat needles, the cedar have much more similar to a juniper bush. Indeed, I believe they're in the same family. These multiple little spines that kind of come off of each extended section. Smells really good, and yeah, pointy. Careful. So, cool thing is, cedar trees are responsible for a lot of pretty amazing products. I mean, they use it to make shingles for houses, building materials for spas, because of the oils that are inside of it, it's naturally resistant to decay and pests and things like that. So that's why they're often used in spas. Plus, the smell that they produce, especially when they're heated, is it's like no other. So, I mean, that alone is really cool. They make essential oils out of it, and more importantly for me, they make pencils. I grew up as an artist. The amount of my childhood spent using a number 2 pencil above just about any other tool to create sketches, drawings, anything I could think of, and get in trouble by my teachers came from one of these guys right here. So I'm very grateful for that. Now, in order to harvest from this tree, you'll also notice one other characteristic before we get to that point, is the bark is kind of stringy looking, kind of hangs off in these little wisps that kind of peel off fairly easily. Older trees tend to have easier ways to peel it off, but you'll see you can just pull these little pieces right off. Now, we're going to hold on to that, but we want to get like a bigger section, so I'm going to come down here. Now, with any tree, you don't want to go all the way around it, and you don't want to make such a big gaping wound by taking the bark that you're going to leave the tree open to disease. So you want to make rather small incisions and peel off strips of bark so that, or better yet, find a tree that's already dead or on its way out. That way you're not going to be causing any lasting damage. But a little bit of an incision we can take from the tree and it's going to be okay. So I'm just going to break up these branches here. So the big ones. Alright. So just stick gore right across the side there and down. And we don't need all the bark, we just need this outer layer here. And it'll come off in these nice long strips. These are saturated with cedar wood essential oils. So, great for making fires. As we'll show you soon. Let me harvest it from a different part. And if it's sections that you can pull off without cutting the tree at all, that's even better. Less likely to damage it in the long run. And again, we're not trying to take the inner bark as well. We just want this fluffy stuff on the outside, the real shaggy bits. It's basically like the armor for the tree. And then below that, the inner bark is almost like a circulatory system, sending all the water and nutrients to different parts of the plant, and fairly soon this should start having sap drip out of it to help heal up and seal the wounds from peeling the bark in certain areas. So as I said, we don't want to take too much from one tree. Let me grab from a couple of different trees and I'll be back. Okay. Now it is time to try and make a fire. So I'm actually kneeling on some pine boughs that I put out so that I can keep my knees dry. Fire starter. So we're going to start off by making the bird's nest. So that's 2 different types of grass here. So you want to start with the thick stuff first. Alright, so that's the first layer. Now we go a little thinner with some lighter grass. we're doing is we're processing it by breaking it up so that the fibers kind of stick out all bristly, which makes it easier for them to catch a spark. All right, so that's the first part. Now, grab the birch bark that we collected, same thing. I'm gonna take my gloves off for this part, even though it's freezing. It'll produce a lot of dust when you do this. Try and get it to fall onto your bird's nest so that as you're striking sparks, more and more of this fluffy burnable material lands in the area where the sparks are going to fall. If it's windy, try to find some place where you can be sheltered from the wind. Otherwise, all this good stuff just gets blown away. All right. Losing light quickly here. So get that in the middle. All right, now the birch bark. Time for gloves again, because it is freaking cold. I'm gonna scrape off shavings from the bark onto the middle of the bird's nest. Birch bark is suffused or infused or soaked or choked or whatever the hell you want to call it with a bunch of essential oils that burn really, really well, even when they're wet. Now this is off of a dead tree, so I was able to harvest quite a large amount of it without worrying about damaging the tree because it's already dead. Now you can also start breaking off little tiny strips. Just kind of intermixing that with your stuff that you already got. Although I'm running out of light here, so I'm gonna try with what we've got so far. Okay. So what we have here now is a ferrocerium rod and a striker. And on this side is magnesium. So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to scrape off some of these magnesium filings into the middle of the bird's nest, and that should help you to ignite just about anything. Use the back of my knife here. Wreaks havoc on your blade, but I'm going to be sharpening them later, so I'm not too worried about it. Almost there, guys. All right, so now with the ferrocerium rod, you need a striker that has a relatively sharp edge. You can use a knife if you wanted to, but again, what I forgot to do is file the back of my knife to give it a nice sharp edge so that I wouldn't have to use my blade, which I will do next time. So I'm gonna use this little striker. It's a little bit more tedious, but it'll do the job. So key thing is, you don't want it just to be like these little tiny sparks like that, because that's not going to light anything. What you want to do is have even pressure from front to back, and then if it hits the ground and still manages to burn a little bit, like that, then you have a chance of actually lighting a fire. I might even use the knife for this. Almost. Damn it. go. So, gives you an idea, but seeing as how I have to be out of this park by dark, I best get going.